There are a lot of 2D classic Sonic fan games out there, many of which are very, very good. But to be honest, I don't really have that much to say about a lot of them because they are mostly just kind of standard, typical 2D Sonic stuff, and they're good, and that's really all I have to say. So instead of trying to cover every single one out there and just saying the same thing over and over again, I just want to cover my personal favorite 2D classic Sonic fan game, which is Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit. Coming to this game way late to the party, but that's how I roll, and I heard so much good stuff about this game that it had a lot of high expectations for me, and to my surprise, this totally blew my expectations out of the water. Not only is this one of my favorite Sonic fan games ever, I legitimately think this is just one of the best Sonic games, period, that's ever been made. If I were to make a direct comparison, quality-wise, to an official Sonic game, this is closest to Sonic Mania in how good it is, and that is saying a lot. And obviously, it's also closest to Mania in that it's a new, modern Sonic game, but it's trying to emulate the look and feel of the old Sonic games. And this game nails that so hard. Everything about it. The look, the sound, the aesthetic, the design of all the elements. It feels so authentic to the original Mega Drive Sonic games. But the thing that really impresses me with how much this feels like the original games is in the gameplay and the level design. Because something as someone that has played all the 2D Sonic games and is so intimately familiar with them, there are differences to them. While they're all, similar kinds of games, you can look at each one and they all have little different quirks and different, design ideologies behind their development that really come through when you really understand the games and really play them a lot. Like, even the original trilogy, Sonic 1, 2, and 3K, while they all do have their differences, they definitely all have that Hirokazu Yasuhara feel to them, whereas you play Sonic CD, a game he wasn't involved with, and it's got a very different feel to it. And even something like Mania that does a pretty good job at feeling like the original Sonic games, especially 3 and Knuckles, it still has its own little vibe going on. And you could say the same thing for Superstars, and the Sonic 4 games, and the Sonic Advance games. They all feel a little bit different from each other, and fan games too, that's also the case. You can play a Lake Fepard Sonic game, and you're like, yeah, this feels like a Lake Fepard game. But when you play Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit, this game doesn't have a unique feel that sets it apart from any other 2D Sonic game, and I mean that in the best possible way. This game feels like it could have been designed by Hirokazu Yasuhara himself, which is possibly the highest praise I can ever give to a Sonic fan project. The level design is so one-to-one the kind of design that we see, especially in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It is a mimicry of that style, perfectly done. And that's the idea with Triple Trouble 16-bit, right? It's what if the original Sonic team made a Mega Drive version of Triple Trouble. And this really does feel like this could have been made by the original Sonic team after Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So, mission accomplished on that front. Not only does this game feel like the original Sonic games, it is as good as the original Sonic games. And I love to see how this game, while it is mostly just an old-school 2D classic Sonic game like the originals, it also does try some new things and try to evolve the formula a little bit here and there. Like the fact that when you play in a Sonic and Tails, you can swap between the two characters at any time. That's a cool idea, I like that. There are some problems that come from it that I'll get to later, but it's a sensible way to try to progress those original games and what they could do. And I like how the game has a lot of the features and mechanics from Sonic Triple Trouble, so you can recurl in the air when you're playing as Sonic, which honestly I feel like every character should be able to do that because it's just such a great mechanic. Combos with the drop dash so well because you get flung up off of a spring or a ramp or something and you can immediately keep going. Feels so good. But I think the thing that really impressed me with Triple Trouble 16-bit is how it expands upon Sonic Team's attempt to get the whole experience of playing through a Sonic game more seamless. You know, with 3K, they made it so that both acts of the zone are continuous. You beat the boss and you just keep going right from there. But Triple Trouble 16-bit takes it to that next step because all the zones are continuous as well. They all have those zone transitions, but it never cuts to black. You just go directly from one to another. It's beautiful. It's so smooth, so satisfying. Makes the game feel so much more cohesive than any other 2D Sonic game I've ever played. I love it. And the fact that this is a reimagining of Triple Trouble kind of adds an extra layer of fun to playing it for me, because that game's actually one of my least favorite of the 8-bit Sonic games, and in general, I don't have a huge love for those games. So you get to see the ideas of this game that I'm not in love with turned into something I am in love with, and seeing how they remix and alter so many of the different set pieces and little moments from Triple Trouble to turn it into something so much cooler than the original game. Like the second zone, the horrible train boss at the end of it's been turned into a whole third act. That's really cool. Fang's boss fights have been moved into the regular playthrough rather than the special stages. You also get a proper Knuckles boss fight where you actually fight him on foot, although you still get the weird submarine fight as well, and that's also better. And it takes the power-up stuff and expands on that with the whole Sea Fox section in the water zone, making it into a much bigger and more involved thing. And honestly, gameplay-wise, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but it's a cool little set piece. And then when you're playing through it as Knuckles, instead he gets the breather necklace from SA2 and you start swimming around. And Knuckles has, like, exclusive stuff that only he plays, just like Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I also like seeing how there have been aspects from other Sonic games incorporated in here, like the homing attack shield from 3D Blast has been added. That's neat, and a couple other cool little nods to other Sonic games that I like, especially music-wise. There's a lot of really good remixes of Sonic music from across many different games in the series. The production value in this game is nuts. This does not feel like a fan game or a fan project or anything. This feels 100% professional to me. If this was an official Sonic game that came out and Sega charged $20-30 for, I'd be like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Honestly, my biggest problem with this game is that it didn't come out in 1995, because if it had, then it would have just as much of a place in my heart as the original Sonic games, which it totally deserves. I'm gonna tell you right now, from now on, if I ever feel like marathoning through the original Sonic games, this has been added to that. This is now part of the original series, as far as I'm concerned. Which, again, that's about the highest praise I think I could possibly give to a Sonic fan game. However, it's not to say that this game is perfect. I do have some criticisms for it. Biggest of which is really the same problem I have with Sonic Mania, that it being so much like the original Sonic games, it also inherits a lot of the problems and flaws of the original Sonic games. Like, special stages here are pretty good, but still, ultimately, I'd rather play the Sonic game. Bosses here are better than you usually find in a 2D Sonic game, but still not amazing overall. And yeah, you get a couple of auto-scroller sections that make for a nice spectacle, but not really something that I love to play. But at least the snowboarding one, while it is cool, you can actually skip it in the options menu if you want, so I appreciate that. But just like Sonic Mania, I wouldn't really consider any of these things huge problems that really harm the experience, because the overall package is still so much fun that whatever. But something I would say that I don't love about Triple Trouble 16-bit is the playable character selection here. Because, like I said, you can swap between Sonic and Tails, and that's cool, but it kind of has that same issue that Sonic 4 Episode 2 has, where you're essentially forced to play easy mode because you can't just play Sonic by himself. Sonic and Tails are a package deal here, so you always have access to Tails' flight, and you always have the ability to cheese the level design if you want. Of course, I could just not switch to Tails, but even then, you can still fly with Tails while playing as Sonic. It's just a part of the game this way. So, nah, between all the playable characters here, I felt like I didn't have a really good way to play through the game without having some really significant way to cheese the level design until I got to Metal Sonic. He's like the only one that doesn't have some really powerful vertical movement abilities, and it's the only playthrough where I felt like I was playing the normal game of Triple Trouble 16-bit. And Metal Sonic being that way is kind of a byproduct of a problem that he has, in that his air ability is really not super useful. He just gets a little hover with a hitbox around it, and I found very few applications for that. Amy was also added to the game in an update, and she's cool. She's got a number of different movesets that you can swap between, including Superstars, which is my preferred one. Little different than how it actually works in Superstars, but whatever, it's good enough. She's fun to play as. But Fang here is a big disappointment for me. I like the idea of being able to play as Fang, and I love how he doesn't roll in a ball, so anything that forces you into a ball is like him tumbling out of control, like, oh god! That's great. But his actual ability, Fang can fire his gun, and that makes sense, but you can only do it forward. I would prefer to be able to shoot in like 8 directions to make it more useful. But then his other thing is he gets a triple jump. And, like, that just doesn't really feel very Fang. Like, I think of Fang, I think of him using his tail like a spring. He should be, like, bouncing around, and he just doesn't do that, and it's kind of weird. And while the triple jump is fun, it allows him to get a lot of height and circumvent a lot of the level design in a way that you already can by using Tails Flight, or similarly to how you can with Amy's double jump. Fang just doesn't really offer a unique experience compared to playing as the other characters, so I really didn't bother to mess around with him too much. But that's really my only, like, kinda major problem with Triple Trouble 16-bit. Another not really important issue I have with this game is that the idea here of taking Triple Trouble and trying to make it the sequel to 3 and Knuckles is a little weird to me, because Triple Trouble being an 8-bit game, it was kind of following, like, that line of Sonic games, which were very detached from the main games, which is why Knuckles being a bad guy in that game doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because it's not really supposed to connect to Sonic 3, but now it is, and now it doesn't really make sense for Knuckles to be working with Eggman, so their solution to it here was that it's actually Metal Sonic impersonating Knuckles, and I mean, I guess that kind of addresses the problem. But why is he doing that? No reason, just because Knuckles is in Triple Trouble, so we gotta justify that somehow. You know, it's just a little inelegant and sloppy, because you're trying to mash these 2 different interpretations of Sonic together that aren't really supposed to go together. Personally, I probably would have just taken out Knuckles being a bad guy here and made Metal Sonic the 3rd pillar of this Triple Trouble if you really wanted it to fit with the original games. But whatever, it's not really a big deal, who cares? Plus, we got cool Knuckles fights where he uses his moves from other games, so it was worth it. I guess while we're talking about story stuff, kind of, I will mention a little bit that there is a competition mode here that has a little, like, story that you can play through that actually has, like, cutscenes with dialogue. And the writing here is a little bit cringe, to be honest, as it usually is in Sonic fan games. Pretty much all of them that I've seen struggle with story and writing stuff. So I'm not going to hang the game over it, but not great. And lastly, a personal qualm that I have with this game, it doesn't have a time attack mode. What the heck? This game is really fun, and these levels are really good, and I want to get good at them and learn them and blast through them really quickly. And I had to use the games like level select, and it doesn't work as well, and slower. Come on now. I decree that any Sonic fan game worth its salt must have a time attack mode with 1-button instant restarts. Trust me, you're doing your game a very good service by adding that. It's worth it. Anyway, that's that. Triple Trouble 16-bit. Yeah, not too many problems here. Again, very similar to Mania. Small little quibbles, but overall this game is fantastic, and I'm very excited to see what Noah Copeland is working on in the future. This definitely put him on my radar. I don't even know what his next game is. It hasn't been announced or anything. I don't know anything about it, and I could already tell you I'm gonna buy it day one, and I would advise you to probably do the same.